Yeah, so I was thinking about it and I was like, it's 100% the freezer.
Because Lauren, that one has like a latch on it, the other one just swings.
Yeah, the other one, I took the lemons and strawberries in the other one. But then when I went back there with it was like blocked off, so I was just like, oh, this will be fine. It's definitely just frozen. They're having little slushies.
I mean, half the time usually.
Okay, we're starting off with our mini quiz that I warned you guys about. So you don't need to put your phones up, or you don't need to put your phones at the front of the room, but you do need to get your stuff put away, please. Clear off your desk for a moment. It should be pretty quick, but don't rush so much. I was like sweeping stuff off my table and I sent the sweat out like. Okay, so just make sure you understand the directions. So 11 questions are at the top of the page. It is just matching, as I said. I'm not trying to get you to memorize word for word, just be able to match them up. So please put your answers in the blanks next to the question number. And then on the second half of the page are the answers. So pick choice A through K or L through V, depending on which form you have. And then come put it in the basket, please, and then we will move on. And also, there's like no tricks to it. 11 answers, 11 questions. Every question gets used once, so you can save the harder ones for the end. In the basket, please. Let's give everybody a couple more minutes to get caught up with the rest of us. Okay, anybody still trying? It's fine if you are, I just don't want to. Okay, so should be no surprises there. So again, I'm just trying to encourage you to put in a touch of effort on the things that you may have forgotten. And there'll be a couple more of these. So the very next thing on our agenda is me reminding you, or not reminding you, but me telling you that today you guys picked up part 2 of this. When you see this is what you do part 2, so you should number that as 114. And I will do the same thing for you next class, a quick mini quiz that will have all of those just matching. So again, I hope that you remember them all, but if you have forgotten a couple of them, then you need to put stars by them and make sure that you're prepared for those. But the second one will be all of part 2 plus a couple questions from part 1. So anything that you just took a quiz on that you couldn't remember what it matched up to, you need to review that as well.
Will I go in the minor category or the major?
Today's will be minor. I'll probably end up maybe near the last one. I might make it a small major grade or something because it'll have some questions from the previous ones as well. So, but I do try to do a lot of these small quizzes to help you guys kind of break the material as we get closer to the AP exam, because it's not realistic to spend a ton of time studying right before. It makes a lot more sense to kind of chip away at it this last month that we have. So any questions about 114 or the mini quiz next class? Okay, so we are going to spend the majority of our class on the big packet that you guys picked up, 115, which is where we're going to talk about a certain type of FRQ today. But before I switch to screen here, notice the homework. Make sure you review 114 so that you're ready for an easy quiz grade. Obviously won't be worth 1,000,000 points, but these do add up over time. I'm going to remind you about the Unit 8 FRQs. I gave you a handout a few classes ago, and I've been delaying that homework because you've had enough to do, but I am going to ask you to actually do that for homework. And then before I forget, handout 110, last class you guys did, we reviewed L'Hopital's rule, and you guys did a circuit on it, and we did like 4 questions together, and then you were to do at least half of the rest of it. You remember this? Okay, so I will ask for that next class, and you'll get a homework assignment, a homework grade. And again, I'm only seeing that you did the 4 that we did together, plus 9 more, which would be half of them. But if you want to go and actually complete it, if you know that you need more practice on L'Hopital's rule, there will be a second optional grade. So you get 1 grade for doing what was required, what we did in class last time, and then there's a second optional homework grade if you want to complete it. So if you're looking to get extra practice, or you're looking to boost your minor part of your grade, then that would be an opportunity for you. We do have a few grades after the AP exam, but just so you guys have fair warning here, mostly once we have the AP exam, there'll be very few grades. So make sure that you're trying to take advantage of the opportunities that I give to you. Okay, so I will put that back up and remind you guys later. Let's go ahead and move on to the FRQ portion. So obviously I have no idea which FRQs you guys will get this year, but I feel like part of my job is to expose you to the ones that are most likely to show up. So of all of the FRQ types, this type is by far the most common type. And this is not all of them. There's 4 of them on here. I don't know that we'll get to all 4 of them today. But even though I only picked out 4 of them, notice that one of them's from 2019 FRQ3, 2018 FRQ3, 2017 FRQ3, 2016 FRQ3. All of these have something in common. They're all similar question types. What about 2020? Why do you think I didn't use that one? It's actually, so COVID. 2020 was COVID, and their AP exam was just a lot different. It was like 2 humongous FRQs. So,
That's
that-
it? And no MCQ?
yeah, but it was all virtual too.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it was
how
very-
is that weird?
Huh?
How do they keep people from cheating? by using that?
Well, they phrase questions in a way that if you tried to cheat, you would waste so much time that you wouldn't finish on time, or they phrase them in a way that, like if you try to look them up, like it's likely to pull up stuff that you don't think it means and stuff. So, I can, if you guys are really interested, I can show you what theirs look like, but because there was some mock exams that came out that year. But I'm just pointing out that 2020 probably would have had one like this as well, and I just haven't updated this document. 2021 and last year there was another one that were like these. So I'm only pointing that out to you because of all 6 FRQs, remember you get 6 FRQs on your AP exam. 2 are calculator, the last 4 are no calculator. Very likely, I can't promise because I don't know anything, but very likely FRQ3 is going to be one that is similar to this, where you've got a shape. In fact, I think we've even looked at this FRQ before. Does this look familiar to y'all? Okay. Hopefully that doesn't make it too easy, I guess, but a shape where at some point, I don't want to give you too many hints, but at some point you have to find some of this area the old-fashioned way by finding triangles and finding the area of triangles and adding it up manually. And then notice the second one, similar type of graph. At some point you're going to be trying to find the area manually, not just calculus. Third one, same idea. Fourth one also has that. Now, of course, that's not the entire FRQ, but that's what these all have in common. So, at least with one of these, I do want you to treat it as a real practice one like we did last time. I realize FRQs are going to be the thing you guys are most concerned about, and unfortunately, the only way they're going to get easier is if we really put our best effort in as we see them. So, before we get started here, this one does have an average of 2.7 out of 9 the year it was given, so that gives you some perspective on how difficult it is. Second one looks to be a little bit easier, a little bit higher average, but of course, even if you could do better than that, we still want to try to squeeze out a few more points because you just never know. You know, you could do great on this one on the real AP exam and then struggle a lot on the one after that. So. All right, so what I'd like you to do on this first, just the first one, I am going to give you 15 minutes and I want you to try your best on it. And then I will share the scoring guide. We can discuss the math. We can discuss scoring questions that you need to ask. But because this is FRQ3, this would be no calculator. So just like we did last time, just do your best. If you've got extra time, see how you can check your work, reread questions, learn from your mistakes. If you end up getting a 2 out of 9 versus an 8 out of 9, I'm not going to dock your grade differently. So it will be a participation grade. So, okay, and start, please. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but those of you that signed up to do the mock exam, I was asked to remind you to please be here and ready to start at 8. 8 o'clock is when we'll start the mock exam this Saturday, if you signed up for it. Now, if you show up at 8:15, there's no punishment or anything, but then you will be 15 minutes behind, and then, you know, you're rushed, and that kind of defeats the purpose of doing a mock exam, so. And I think we did do this one earlier this year, so hopefully it feels just a tiny bit easier. Did you not pick this up today? This one of the handouts.
Oh,
You don't have to-
I didn't realize this was.
Sorry. It just showed me the first page of one of the big handouts. I don't expect you to try to read that, sorry. Did you just check in or what?
I just got to school, yeah.
3 minutes ago, we started this FRQ, so. exactly halfway in. 7.5 minutes past 7.5 minutes to go.
Bless you.
Got about just a touch over 2 minutes. Okay, go ahead and stop. So there is a full 15 minutes. So again, there's nothing saying that you couldn't spend longer or spend less and move on to a different question. But I need y'all to get a feel of what 15 minutes is. So if you don't have extended time and you feel like you're being rushed, then you're going to have to kind of learn to speed up a bit before the real deal. Okay, so just out of curiosity, what A, B, C, or D, which one did you think was the hardest? A? I would probably agree with that. So I would be happy to, we can go over all of the parts that we need to. Of course, if there's something math related that we're not remembering, then if we just get past it, then you're kind of missing the point here. But first off, let's just go through all of the parts and talk about what they're expecting to see, because that's part of what y'all need to learn. So part A, if you got 9 pi force minus 4 for your final answer, that's worth a point. So go ahead and put a +1 if you got that. You get 1 point if you found this correctly, which was 9 minus 9 pi force. So that was the part that you actually, this is the part that is consistent with all of these FRQs on this handout, all of them that are stapled together. To find that, you had to find some area manually. You did that? Okay. So we can talk about where that came from, but that's how you get that point if you had that and evaluated that correctly. And then this part, this is one that I think some of you who may even got the answer right maybe didn't quite show enough. So to know the area, again, sometimes phrasing it as area helps out, but to find the area from -6 to 5 is the same thing as finding the area from -6 to -2 plus the area from -2 to 5. Do you see how adding these two areas would give you that area? So somewhere in your work, did you show that adding those two parts is how you get that answer? Or did you say it in words? Or something like that, yeah.
So I said that -6
5 f of x of d of x minus negative 2 to 5 f of x of d of x equals negative 6 to negative 2 f of x of d of x. So instead of, like, I basically just switched it.
So,
I
like,
had, like, the same
so you have
basic
this.
setup and stuff. I just subtracted instead of added.
Okay, so this is what you were trying to find in this question?
Yeah.
So you took
So that was
this
like the answer.
minus this,
Yeah.
like you just have this rearranged?
Yeah.
That's fine, yeah. But that's part of what I want y'all to see about this. Like, at some point to get that answer, you had to make this connection. But if you're not writing it down, you can't get that point. So that's the type of thing that I think needs to get easier for you over time. Okay, part B, let's see how you did on these 2 points. So 1 point if you did the fundamental theorem of calculus. So that means, like, when you integrated this was on today's mini quiz, by the way. That's the same thing of f of 5 minus f of 3. And then over here, plug in 5, plug in 3. There's just no x to plug in. So if you did that, you did the fundamental theorem of calculus correctly and you got a point. If you use those correctly. And then the second point, you had to come up with that as an answer. 2 plus 2 square roots of 5. Now notice, kind of some unusual looking answers here, and this was no calculator, so this is the level of difficulty they're expecting. Or you could have just combined this as one big integral, and then that's fine as well. Any questions about scoring on B? Okay, C. Let's see, your 1 point for your final answer, which would be this, 11 minus 9 pi over 4. You get 1 point if you figured out that -1 is a place you needed to check. -1 was likely to be a max. So if you only process that in your head and you didn't write something down about it, then that's not enough. And somewhere you needed to make this connection as well. Remember, this is called the candidates test. Easiest way to justify your work. Okay, and then I'll slide up real quick. Part D only had 1 point, and I want to talk about it a little bit more, but we're about to get cut off, so we'll finish this when we come back. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up checking the answers to these so that we can talk about them and give you a chance to ask a couple questions and see where you can maybe make some improvements the next time. Okay, so one thing, I ran out of time here, but on part C, the reason why you need this as one of the points, you have to make this connection somewhere, is because if you're answering questions about G and you don't explain where, well, hold on, I could be saying this wrong now that I think about it. Yeah, so I don't have the graph up here, but the graph is of F. So if you're answering questions about G, it comes to how do you know that about, you can't make your justification about G if all they give you is F. You need to use the justification or refer to the thing that they give you. So making this connection is what they're expecting there, because maximum of G so you've got to relay somehow how you knew the graph of F, which they gave to you, is supposed to help you get these answers for G. Is basically what it amounts to. Now notice, one thing on this is they gave 1 point for this that I have highlighted. They do consider -1, but by far the safer bet, because, why did they pick -1 and not 1/2? Like, it's kind of hard to explain why they would pick that one over this one. But if absolute max or absolute min, if you remember EVT, you should test the endpoints, which would be -2 and 5, and anything that's a critical number, so anywhere it crosses the x-axis, it could be changing directions or something, which is where they're getting the -1 and the 1/2. So technically you only had to do the -1 for the point, but the scoring guide could have just as easily been identify x equals 1/2. So critical numbers and endpoints, you need to test all of those for that. Okay, and then part D, so we will do an activity probably Thursday to start reviewing limits a little bit. I'm kind of surprised no one said that they thought this was the hardest one, but I guess that's good because this is one of the easier ones. It's just that you guys haven't done limits in a while. But with limits, now first off, if you tried to do this with L'Hopital's rule, that's not going to work. L'Hopital's rule only works if it's in indeterminate form. This was not indeterminate form. You should have just done direct substitution. So plug in 1 for x, plug in 1 for x, plug in 1 for x, plug in 1 for x. 10 to the first is 10. How did they know f prime of 1 was 2? How are you supposed to know that?
The slope of the graph.
Right, the graph is of f, and derivative just means slope. So notice that slope of that line is consistent enough that you can count rise over run. And then right here, do you guys remember how to do arctan of 1? Why this is pi over 4? Nobody knew that was pi over 4?
I didn't know when I was doing it, but I remember now.
Okay, well the good news is they don't even expect you to evaluate arctan of 1. So if you did this, you get the point. You don't have to evaluate arctan of 1. So my recommendation would be on the AP exam, if you had something like that, unless you're 100% sure that you know that that's pi over 4, don't even risk changing it. Just leave it alone and quit, because you might lose that. If you write this but then you write something wrong, they're not going to give you the point. But you can stop there. This is considered arithmetic, and so that's fine. Now you cannot stop here. You actually have to evaluate f of 1, you actually have to evaluate f prime of 1, but you don't have to do arithmetic, and they consider that part of the arithmetic. That's just a number. So you can actually give yourself a point if you stop there. Okay, so first off, any questions about the grading and the point distribution? Okay, then second, which part of these questions do you not remember how to do that you want me to help you with the math on before we move on? You guys knew where the like 9 minus 9 pi 4s, you know where that came from? We don't need to talk about any of that stuff. Did you remember to do candidates test on part C? No? Absolute max or absolute min, you should always do that.
Can you go over the whole thing on letter A?
Letter A? Sure. Okay, so they're telling me this. So again, to try to make sense of this in my head, I just phrase it in my head as area. The area from -6 to 5, so notice that's off the graph, but -6 to 5 has an area of 7. And we are supposed to find the area from -6 to -2. That's the point of part A. So knowing this whole thing is 7, we can find this piece if we know how much this piece is. So for that, you have to understand that integration is area under a curve. So what I did is I just started, so we don't have an integral that we can integrate or anything like that. I just started splitting this up. So I looked at this triangle, I did base times height divided by 2, and got, what, 1/2? It's above the x-axis, so it's positive. And then I did this one, base times height divided by 2, and it's negative 1/2. So those areas are canceling each other out so far.
That's above the line.
Above what line?
The graph.
It's not about that. If it's above the x-axis, it's positive, and if it's below the x-axis, it's negative. It's not about above or below the function, because that would switch the rules up the other way too. That would make this stuff negative because it's below. Okay, base times height divided by 2 here would be 1/4, I believe, but below the x-axis, so negative. You've got this big triangle, base times height divided by 2, so 1/2 height times base, that would be 9/4, and that's above the x-axis, so that's positive. And then finally this part, this is the part that I thought you guys might have wanted to ask about. But they tell you this is a quarter circle centered at 5,3. So if this was a completely full square, that would be 3 by 3 or 9. But if I subtract off this much of it that's not part of that, then it would be a quarter, so 1/4 of pi r squared. And if you imagine the circle going all the way around, he has a radius of 3. So this guy had 9 minus 9 pi fourths. I think you got 1 point if you just found that part right there, right? So one part of A, we had to, so what I drew on here is probably not enough to get that point. I'm kind of showing you my reasoning here, but if I want to know this, all of this area, oops, that's not what I'm trying to find, from -6 to -2, even though some of it's not on the graph, that's the same thing as -6 to 5, which would be all of this. Take away the part we don't want, which would be -2 to 5. This part they gave to us in the directions, that's 7. This part, again, phrase it as area. The area from -2 to 5, which is what we just calculated. 1/2, back to 0, down to -1/4. Add this, you would be up to 8/4, which would be 2. Plus this much, which would be 9 minus 9 pi over 4. So 7 minus 11 would be -4. I'm going kind of quickly here, but was that the final answer for part A? -4 minus 9 pi fourths?
Or plus.
Oh, yeah, I didn't distribute, so. So a couple things. One is you have to understand this reasoning. All of this area is the same as, or this part of the area, what you're trying to find here is this, is the same as all of the area, which we knew was 7. They told us that in the directions, minus this much, which we had to find by finding the pieces. And then 2, you actually have to be able to find the pieces. So a bunch of triangles, part of a square that was not inside of a quarter circle. Area above the x-axis is positive, area below the x-axis is negative. But okay, is that enough for that?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a good one to ask, because again, this is what this type of work should show up on the next 3 FRQs. That's why these 4 are stapled together. They're not random, they're all the same type. This is the type that you should expect to be on your AP exam. So as soon as you see one like this, and you see that you need area under there, you can at least kind of hit the ground running and have some practice on what that looks like. Okay, I would like to do one more of these with you guys today. Again, I know there's 4 here, but we can worry about the other 2 another time, because I've already got you doing a couple for homework, so I'll remind you of all of that stuff. But it looks like the next one has a slightly higher average, 3.36 out of 9. Actually, I'm sorry, I moved on too quickly from this one. As I said the last time, and I will continue to say, I'm not real concerned with your score. If you only got 2 out of 9 or 1 out of 9 and you feel defeated by that, that's not what's important. What's important is, now that you see what you did versus what the answers are, you need to find 2 or 3 points that you feel like you could pick up next time if you saw one similar to this. It doesn't have to be, I mean, obviously not the hardest 2 or 3 points, but you should have been probably pretty close to a couple of those. And over time, getting a point or 2 more each time on average is going to add up and what's going to make the difference. So, all right, so FRQ2 has a slightly higher average, which means that you should maybe think it's easier overall, but let me go ahead and I would like you to spend another full 15 minutes on this. So whatever you may have learned from the last one, you finished with 3 minutes left and then you saw some careless mistakes, try to do what you can to avoid that this time. Okay, and timer has started. So same thing, just do the best you can. It's all honor system, just for your information. Be quick to jump around, whatever it is that's going to get you more points. 5 minutes. Last minute. Time's up. So let's go ahead and check answers and see where you could have maybe squeezed out another point or two. Then I'll recap what you need to have done between now and Thursday. Okay, so question or part A. If f of 1 is 3, what is f of negative 5? So you get 1 point if you realize that you needed the area from 1 to negative 5. If you set that integral up somewhere. Now, if you just went about finding it and you never said what you were doing, you weren't writing the calculus down, then that's how you could lose a point that you definitely deserved. And then the second point is if you get the answer. 12.5 or 25/5. Or, don't forget, I think I've said this last time, but I didn't emphasize it as much as I did in my other class. You don't have to do any arithmetic. This also gets you the second point, or this even gets you the second point. Realistically, you should probably just stop there. Okay, part B, evaluate 1 to 6. So this was the splitting it up into area parts. So you had to split it up at x equals 3. So if you show some work that showed that, you get a point. The only way for you to get the area from 3 to 6 was to integrate. So if you did this and you integrated it correctly, there's no chain rule there, so it wasn't too bad. Raise the power by 1, divide by the new power, check by taking the derivative. That's where you got the second point. This. And then the third point, you had to come up with an answer of 10, or that before it, that's equivalent to 10. Part B is the part that you guys should have been a little more comfortable with. Some of it was area shapes, geometry shapes, just find them, and then, but a part of that was integration. Integration is how you find area under a curve. Okay, part C, and I will admit I did this yesterday. I don't remember what I was doing, but I gave tests all day yesterday, so I did some of this while my students were taking a test. I missed part C because I didn't read the question very carefully. It says figure out where it's both increasing and concave up, and I listed it as 2 different answers. I did where is it increasing and why, and where is it concave up and why, but it was when is it both. And so that would be from 0 to 1 and 4 to 6. So you get 1 point if you had both of those.
So what if you did what you said before, like you answered them separately? So you got 4 answers instead of 2, but you did get those 2 answers. Did you get like half a point?
They don't do half a point, but depending on how you worded it, technically the way I worded it might be okay, because I said f is increasing during these times and y, and it's concave up during these times and y. So indirectly I kind of said when it's both. So I think they would probably have given me that point, but I didn't just come out and say these 2. Okay, and then for your reasoning, now again, you cannot just be talking about G here, because you can't be answering a question about F referring to the graph of G, because then that raises the question, how did you know that connection? And so that's what they're trying to show here. F is increasing when its derivative is positive, which is when G is positive. And also when it's increasing. So I don't know what questions you guys might want to ask about this, not that we're going to have a ton of time, but on these question types, I feel like one thing that really is going to set you back is if you didn't read the directions first. So reread those directions. It says G, the derivative of F. I feel like it really helps if you write that out. G is the derivative of F. Because like on part 1, when you need to know, like if I want to integrate this side to find things out about F, like part A, then I need to integrate this side. If I want to be able to say when f is concave up, I'd really like to know something about the second derivative of f, which would be like the first derivative of g, just taking the derivative of both sides. If you write out their sentence and either integrate both sides or take the derivative of both sides, you can see how these things relate, and that makes it a lot easier. Okay, and then finally 2 points for point of inflection. So 1 point if you figured out it was at x equals 1, and 1 point if your reasoning was sufficient. So I said something like f prime goes from decreasing to increasing, which is the same thing as g of x. Again, if you don't refer to g of x, that's really not a good enough explanation, because it just opens up another question. How did you know g of x was decreasing to increasing at x equals 4? If you're referring to the graph and you can see that it goes from decreasing to increasing, then that's fine. But if they give you g, your justification should be about, or should at least reference g. Okay, so of those 9, go ahead and give yourself a score. And then before you put this to the side, again, most important thing is try to identify a point or two that you feel like if you saw one just like this again, you would be able to pick up. So the next easiest point or two. And then to finish up class here, let me go ahead and remind you what I need you to do. Now, again, there's a little bit more scattershot. There's a lot of little things. So I do recommend you guys check the agenda again to remember. But what I need from you next class is I need you to be ready to do mini quiz over when you see this. This is what you do part 2, and a couple questions from part 1. So if you missed any of those today, make sure you review that. It'll just be another quick matching quiz, not trying to trick you or anything, but I need you to know those things. The bulk of your homework is going to be 108. I gave that to you 2 classes ago, and we just haven't had time. I felt like it was too much homework before. So there are 3 FRQs, and to me that is basically like studying for your last test, because all 3 of those would be great FRQs for your last unit test. Your last unit test will not be this week. We've started talking about what we're going to do with that, but you need to be moving forward on it. And then finally, one more reminder, you should have half of 110 done. That's all I required of you last class, and I will ask for that next time to give you a homework grade. But if you want to complete it, I will give you a second optional homework grade. So you don't have to go back and finish the whole thing, but if you know you need to practice for L'Hopital's rule for your last test anyway, you could get some extra practice and get an optional homework grade. If you don't do the second half of it, you'll just be excused from that part of the assignment, but you do have to have half of it done because I gave you class time for that. Okay, any questions about any of that stuff? Okay. So just based on the averages, it looks like about maybe 1 point higher on the second FRQ than the first FRQ. Is that about how y'all did? Okay. That's pretty consistent then.